Hello, I'm Dick Miller, and I thank you for joining us today. Jeff Smith and I met together several times over the last several years. Jeff, as most of you probably know, is serving as senator in the Wisconsin Senate, and we've had a redistricting in the state, and as he says, it started in January, or went into effect in January, and it changed his area considerably. And in the past, he served the entire Trempealeau County, and now under the new districting, you're serving the upper northern part of the county.
Yeah.
And but I feel he's still our senator. I think we have 3 senators serving this county, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you do.
And
that's
we're,
right.
we're really divided up, and that means we also have 3 assembly members serving this county, which I think makes it a little confusing. I know in the past other counties have had the same situation that we have now, but it was kind of nice to have it the other way.
Yeah, well, Trempealeau County used to be the center of my district pretty much, so I had the whole county.
Yeah.
Now I just have basically that, Oliva, Strum, Osseo stretch, in the northern part.
Yeah, it's a big change, but I know Jeff has been very willing to visit with his constituents in the past, and I'm going to guess that if someone happens to call him from Galesville, he probably would take the call.
Yeah, of course.
And we appreciate that. Since we're on the topic of redistricting, I'm kind of curious in terms of how that's affected representation, majority, minority, and so forth in your particular house of the our legislature.
Yeah, the Senate numbers changed last fall, well, January actually, when they took office, but the elections of last fall changed the numbers between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are still in the majority, but it went from a 22 to 11 majority to an 18 to 15 number. So it makes it, in my view, should be a much more likely that we would have opportunity to have our voices heard and have real legislation that comes out of there that represents all of us. So far, it's been really quiet and slow, and everybody has noticed that there's not a lot happening. I think the new majority, or that slimmer majority, they are still trying to get their feet under them, figuring out how they're supposed to operate. And I have a lot of opinions about that, but it's something new to them.
I would imagine it is, going from having almost 2/3 majority to having perhaps 55-45 majority.
It's that's in the assembly. The assembly went from 64 to 35, and now they're 44 to 55. So they also narrowed their margins there, which again, it should work in all of our favor as a state, so that we have real opportunities to hear every opinion and listen to every opinion. But so far, and I point this out very often, there's only 9 of us, and I'm one of those, who served out of 132 people. That's both sides of the aisle, both houses, 132 people elected into the legislature. Only 9 of us served before 2011. And when was the last time we had split houses and governor and Senate, back and forth? And I think when you think about that, that means 123 members never have had that experience of working together in that sort of situation. So it is a new experience for most, and it's something that I look forward to helping to guide in the future of how we should be operating.
Yeah, I think there would be some real opportunities to begin talking to one another and working together on legislation, as opposed to all coming from one source.
Yeah. First thing I hear from people, or the thing I hear the most from people is, why can't you all work together? We just want you to work together.
Yeah.
And it's just because it has obviously been a painful change for some people.
Well, now you've had some committee work already, I imagine.
Yeah.
And how do you find that situation there? Is it about the same way in terms of trying to feel one's way?
So I'm glad you asked, because I have an issue in there too. So for years now, for the last 5 to 6 years, the Senate has operated, unfortunately, in this manner, and I think I've even talked about it on this program before, and that is that the committee chairs, who are all Republican, because majority party controls that as well, and they have operated with not having in-person executive votes or sessions. What that means is that we have a public hearing on a bill. They choose which bills, by the way, and we don't generally get hearings on our bills, but we have public hearings. That's great. We get all that input from the public and from interested parties of whatever the bill may be, and that's the way it should be. That's always in person. The next step after that, before it gets to the floor, is what we call executive session. And that's when the committee supposed to meet and entertains debate and possibly amendments. They can always vote no on the amendments or accept them. It doesn't matter. And then a final vote on the bill that is being considered. We have not had in person, as I already said, executive hearings for up to almost 6 years. Now, and that happened, long story why we think that happened, but it's basically so they don't have to consider debate and amendments. I complained about that a lot, and I did 2 weeks ago in a committee hearing with utilities, technology, and tourism. Odd combination, I know, but that's that committee. To the chair, he took offense to that. Oh, why don't you ask? Well, I'm asking you right now. I ask all the time. We have a in-person executive. We did have an executive session this week because of that interaction, and I hope that continues. It went fine. Nobody was injured by having that. And when I mentioned that, one thing I skipped was we still vote on bills out of committee, but they just send a paper ballot to our office. And so we sit there in our office and mark yes or no on a ballot rather than having real debate on legislation or even interchange of ideas. So that's really a problem.
Well, now, that method, does it allow for amendments?
The paper ballot?
Yeah.
No.
So someone comes in with a bill idea, and it has some merit, but it could be tweaked. It needs maybe some tweaking, and there's really no opportunity to tweak it and make it interesting.
And when I mentioned the fact of only 9 of us back in the day, there's a term that I used to hear all the time. We called it friendly amendment. A friendly amendment.
Sure.
A friendly amendment meant that the author of the bill accepted an amendment from somebody else. It was a friendly amendment. I have never heard anybody use that term since I've come back into the Senate.
If I may, I would like to share what happens here in Trempealeau County. Almost every resolution that has come before the board has passed unanimously, believe it or not. It's hard to believe. It really is. And of course, we're nonpartisan. But what's so interesting is that in some cases it goes through 3 committees before it gets to the floor. And there's your friendly debate.
Yeah.
And by the time it gets down the line, it's probably better by far than how it started out.
Absolutely.
And so what you're saying, I certainly think that makes for much better legislation.
That's the way people expect government to
Absolutely.
work. Absolutely. The sausage is made in committee.
Yeah.
And by the time it gets to the floor, we know what the results are going to be. And in fact, it only comes to the floor because the majority party or the leaders know they have the votes to pass it.
Yeah.
We do try to introduce amendments on the floor, but of course by then it's to deaf ears, so it never happens. But I am very hopeful that over time now, over this session, there's going to be more adjustments by the majority party to realize they are going to have to be far more open to having that kind of discussion and debate.
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked about this in the past, so this is really new information, and I think if the viewers have concern about are saying to us and the public in general, we just want the legislature to work better together. It starts there.
Yeah, right.
It forces you into talking about things, and
yeah.
And again, I don't think any party has all the answers.
No one person.
No.
This is why you have 132 legislators down there, 33 in the Senate, 99 in the Assembly, so that you come with all sorts of different backgrounds, different perspectives, and different reasons for, and representing different geographies that we all represent. So we bring all that with us, and it all should be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move into, evidently several of you legislators that somehow serve how we got this county organized here. We're into the Trempealeau County for a meeting here about a week or two ago or whatever.
Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks.
And evidently a chance to maybe make some comments, as well as I think some of the people here had concerns, and they shared with you. And I know one was childcare, and we touched base on this just prior to the show starting, and maybe you should share some of that information.
Yeah, that's I think that is, if it isn't already at the top of the list of the great concerns right now, it's rising really fast, because a program that is called Childcare Counts is coming to an end at the end of this month. The funding for that came from the federal funding that we got through the Affordable Care, the Recovery Act, American Recovery Act. So that money is dried up, and the governor did introduce $480 million into the budget proposal he had to save that program, to keep it going. The reason it's important is because it happened during COVID that up to 25% of our child care centers around the state, whether it would be small at home or larger centers, closed. And many, if not most of them, did not reopen again. This was a way to keep them afloat, because as you can imagine, how important it is for families to be able to have access to good child care if they want to work, if you want to be able to pay your bills. And child care has become so expensive, some people even make that choice to not have children or use child care. So instead they stay home because it's more expensive than what they can bring in through through a job. So those are important pieces to our economy, and how it affects our economy. So the concern is that that's coming to an end. The Joint Finance Committee, once again controlled by the majority party, has actually removed that from the budget, along with 600 other parts of the budget that the governor proposed. We don't know what their plan is in that regard. I know that there is a bipartisan alarm out there that this is really going to have some negative effects in July if we don't do something to save this, because the prediction is 25% more child care centers are going to close after this month if they don't have that funding, which is a grant funding that can only be used to pay staff at child care centers. It is not for anything else. And And if anyone has an experience with that, you know how important staff is, and not only that, keeping them where they are. Because the average pay for somebody in a child care center is only $13 an hour, which is a major concern also, because they have such an important role in our children's lives, and such a valuable service.
Well, now I would assume that now we have a child care program in some of the schools in this county, Blair Taylor being one, and I think there are others, and I would assume they probably were able to ask for assistance through this program. There's a good chance they did anyway.
And I don't really know. I can't say individually one center to another, but that's been one of the answers since COVID, is a few school districts, but only through referendum. And I know Blair Taylor had to pass that through a referendum, and the constituency in the Blair Taylor School District said, yes, this is an important. And where else would you want, what more safe place would you want to drop your children off than at the school from the start? And it moves them along. These are learning centers. There is no center that I have visited so many centers over the last few years because of this issue. No manager of a child care center or owner refers to their staff as anything but teachers. They're not babysitters, they're not just workers, they always refer to them as teachers. And one of the reasons for that, not only because they are expected to be trained for what they do, but 90% of brain development occurs between birth and 5 years old. And they are transitioning them or moving them along to be prepared for school and for the next stages of life. So we should, as a society, be really thinking hard about that, in that we probably should be supporting these systems anyway, just for that reason of what it means for the future of our kids.
So you touched on the importance of the development, brain development for the kids. What other negative effects when this quality daycare is not available? What other effects do you see?
It particularly affects rural Wisconsin and places like where we live, right? People generally want to have some convenience of somewhere close to work, somewhere on the way to work or wherever they're going to drop their child off. But if the funds dry up, if there's just not enough clients for families that they serve, that they can pay their bills, they're going to close down, and it's going to get even further away from their workplace that they're able to bring their child, and the economy is negatively affected. Just in that regard, of course, of labor, being able to recruit in your area, but also in small towns, a business may have to just move out and be closer to a child care center. To tell you the truth, who knows? I don't know. There's all sorts of ways this could negatively affect us.
Plus the workforce.
Yep.
We have a workforce, not a glut in this country right now. In fact, we have a shortfall in many areas right now in this country.
We do.
Yeah. We've had some discussion here at the county level in terms of helping to provide possibly a site for child care, because there is nothing close by. And we have 3 significant employers in this area, be it the courthouse, the Trempealeau County Care Center, and the hospital, where a lot of these people coming in are ladies, are women, and my guess is from time to time there is a real shortfall of good quality child care opportunities for these folks. So I think this is just one of those voids like we have in the state, all over the state.
There are statistics that I probably should be careful what the numbers I say to make sure I get it right. But we would call this a childcare desert.
Yeah.
And a childcare desert, I think would mean that there's only one opening for a child for every 3 children that are applied for it, or families that have applied for it. So this is a real thing. This is not something we've made up. And I think anybody listening, most people listening who have been through that know how important this is.
Yeah, and I think it's probably going to continue to be. I think that in the past our child care has been perhaps less learning based, like you're talking about the teacher program. It's been more babysitting, and then are those kids prepared once they go into school?
Yeah.
Are they behind the others and have to try to catch up?
And the way and what's happening out of DC, I think we need to have a mindset of what are we going to do to be ready for we're not getting the help from the federal government, right? When it comes to funding or resources. And I mean, for instance, shutting down, what's the program I'm trying to think of here, for families who need help for that early learning. They're shutting down programs, and as a state we need to step up then, and as communities we need to step up for our own kids.
Well, this is a worn out term, but it does take a village to raise kids.
Yeah.
Families need help.
Yeah.
They can't do it themselves many times, and that's just the way of things. Some of the other topics that reportedly was shared with you, the legislators, as you met with some of the people here in the county, some of them were health care, workforce, housing, tax base, which is a huge one. And I think maybe just touch on the tax base. As you well know, most of the local governments base their ability to tax on increase in new housing or new development, and that could be industrial housing and so forth. And it's not happening. I mean, it's slow. It's a slow process. And so if we get a 1% increase due to new housing in our budget, but the budget, the cost of, in general, has gone up 3%, we're going to fall behind year after year.
Yeah.
And I know that there has been there was an increase in terms of aid, state aid, which has helped immensely, I think. But that's only because they'd fallen so far behind. The state had fallen so far behind.
There was a big change in shared revenue in legislation we passed last year, and it was a boost, but we still have ways to go to catch up.
Yeah.
And why Wisconsin? We hear all the time complaints about property taxes. Well, one of the reasons is because we haven't been doing doing what we should be doing from the state level, providing the resources needed for local government and local entities to do your job. And the only other option was to run referendums and ask people to raise their own taxes through property taxes.
Yeah, and I think the governor made a good point where he was wanting some of that surplus, at least to take some of that surplus, which was larger than what they normally would hope to have, and use some of that to kind of build up these the local governments programming. And as you know, the state mandates so much to the county and to schools and so forth, which is fine, but we all need that support.
Well, not without funding. We cannot be passing legislation so quickly, and I know we only have a few more minutes. There is one other thing that has been coming across in the legislature, started last session, meaning last year. New idea, the majority party decided to play games here with the governor in his veto pen, so they passed bills with no funding. That is why the PFAS, for instance, money is sitting in the joint finance while we pass legislation for policy. There's a literacy program that was mandated to schools that they follow, but the funding went separately to the joint finance committee and they haven't released it. The same thing with the hospital policy or bill of $15 million for to help recovery of what happened in Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls. That's sitting there not being done even though we passed policy. They have constantly been passing policy and bills with no funding attached. So that's one of the things in committee I ask them now all the time. So is funding attached to this bill? Oh, we're going to get to that later is always the answer. We're going to apply through the Joint Finance Committee for that later. That's a serious problem. So they're using the concept that, hey, I passed a good piece of legislation, I authored it, and it passed, and the governor signed it, and then it didn't get funded. But you don't know that. That's not coming across to you that the funding was not there. You only see the headline that policy was passed. Yeah. This is bad government, and it's all about politics.
Yeah, it is. It makes you look good, but then you find out that there's no help. Yeah. Well, I guess those folks who are concerned with some of these issues have to lean on their legislators to examine those areas. One area maybe we can touch on, and I think this is an area of interest to you, is the I want to get the title of it right here. Nelson.
Oh,
Stewardship program, and maybe you could give us a quick idea what that is and where that's at.
That has been, obviously Warren Knowles, Republican governor, and Nelson, Gaylord Nelson, he was a Democratic governor, and then they both were in Congress. They created this Nelson Stewardship Program 60 years ago or around that time, and it has been a great success. It preserves land and property around Wisconsin, so we have the beautiful parks and the beautiful forests and the recreation that we have in this state, and it preserves our water and all those things. There's been a movement by, again, the Republican Party to eliminate this program altogether. We need to keep it going. There's a sunset on it. Every year, it seems like we have to re-establish funding for it so that the DNR can continue to maintain that property and even buy more property as has been offered to them by individual landowners who say they want their land to be under that program. So it's always threatened, and we always have to fight for that funding to continue.
Well, and I think not everybody uses the state parks, and I realize that, but many people do, and there are people that don't have, what should I say, green areas of their own, or they may not live real close to green areas if they have this opportunity. And
well, I'll tell you, tourism in Wisconsin is booming, and that's one of the reasons, and we need to keep, and a lot of our economy is based on tourism, so we need to support that.
Well, and I think it also maintains wild lands that otherwise would be torn up in some cases. But well, we're coming to the end here. After we leave, we're going to have to visit you and I in terms of how frequently it would be good to meet again.
As much as you need me, but I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Have a good one.